The Hillcrest Cemetery. Today we have a wonderful opportunity to learn about Carterville's history from those who made history here. I am the undertaker in this cemetery, and I shall be helping you around as well as the fellow guides. I do have some certain rules that I would like followed, however. First rule, I want anything on your person to be silent, as not to disturb the wonderful spirits who come out and give you the tour today. I also ask of you to stay with the guides and not to wander off. And most importantly, please show respect to everyone and everything here. And thank you.
Welcome all of you here today as our first Tombstone Talk takes place. And I am Laban Carter, and this is my wife Nancy. And I was born in North Carolina back in 1822. And my father was a farmer. I had 6 brothers and sisters. And when I was very young, my mom and dad bought land in Tennessee because the land they figured was better. So put us in wagons and away we went down to Tennessee. And the farming was good, but it was hard work because most of us kids were little. I was only 2. So you see, it was a little tough back then. And, excuse me, when I was about 2 or 3, I lost my 6 brothers and sisters. Died of typhoid, diphtheria, and other diseases. And my beloved mother also passed away. So all that was left was Dad and me. And he worked extremely hard to get us by. I was young, I helped as best I could, but it was tough. It was very difficult. I learned how to farm land, to tend the land, to plow the land, to plant the seed. We did all that, and I thank my dad for that. But then, my first wife was named Barilla, and she and I bought 148 acres in 1860 in Tennessee and went to farming. But sadly, she died. And there I was with Dad and 148 acres. But the very next year, he met Nancy. They got married. She already had a few children, and together, she and I quickly had 5 more. So we had a lot of workers. And we farmed the land, and then the next year comes up, 1861, and as you probably know, war breaks out in Virginia. 1862, the war was heating up in Tennessee. Many were volunteering to go fight, and I felt I had to go too. So I joined the Confederacy and went into the 7th Tennessee Infantry, and they elected me captain. And we saw some action, but after about 6 months, I was discharged from the military due to a disability that I had contracted. Well, I came home to Nancy. The war was raging, and we decided we're going to go up north of the Mason-Dixon line into an area called Egypt. The land was supposed to be better, and there was no war. So we moved, and we got there around 1861. A few years later, we began to search around southern Illinois for a place we wanted. And finally, we found it. It was here in the Carterville precinct. I bought 100 acres of land in the area of Carterville, now known. It was north of East Grand Boulevard. And Division Street was the western boundary, and it went all the way up to where the new library is today. And of course, it then went east and so forth, and that was our 100 acres. It was nothing but woods. And we cleared the land and got ready to go. And just to the west was a place called 8 Mile Prairie. Don't know if you've ever heard of that. But they called it that because when the surveyors were plotting out the county, they figured it was 8 miles from 8 Mile Prairie to the county seat at Bainbridge. That's how it got its name. So I started farming. Things were going pretty good. But the Lord had other things in mind for me. He didn't want me to be a farmer all my life. And in 1869, I discovered coal on my property. Lots of coal. Black diamonds, they called it. And so I hired some men, and we began a slope mine, going in and bringing out coal by horse and wagon. Soon, the wagons weren't big enough to get the coal out enough. So we had a railroad line put into my property up to where we were mining coal, and they started hauling it out. Well, we still couldn't get it out fast enough. It was a big vein. And so I sold all the mineral rights on my property to the Carterville Coal and Coke Company. And they ran a big spur line in, and using their equipment, they began to mine my coal. I wasn't working anymore, as that picture shows you there, as we would go in. And now I had sort of become like a mine owner, a little bit of wealth. And it was nice, believe me. Well, things were going good. And in 1871, my good friend, George McNeil, who you'll meet in a few minutes, he said, you know, Laban, he said, we need to give this town a name because people are coming here for jobs in the coal mines. Well, I thought that was a good idea too. And so we named it after me because George McNeil, his name, we couldn't use. There was already a Georgetown in the state of Illinois. So I got my name, Carterville, on it. It was really nice, really nice. And I kind of looked back and I thought, here I am, grew up the son of a dirt farmer, and here I am now, a wealthy mine owner. Wow. Well, we were so proud to be a part of Carterville that we built the church. And we built it in 1875. Not just me, but other people too. And it was first called the Methodist Episcopal Church. Today it's the First United Methodist Church. So if any of you go there, you know a little bit about the history. And so we named it Carterville, and I was very happy with that. We built our house up on what was called Pea Ridge Avenue. And some of you have heard of Pea Ridge, I'm sure. Today, if you go look for that old place, it's all gone. But it was at the corner of Carter and Ridge. So you can go check it anytime you want. And I'll let Nancy tell you about the rest. But I want to thank all of you for coming and enjoy your day.
My name is Nancy Snodgrass Carter, and I was born in 1839 in the town of Jonesboro, Tennessee, which is over in the eastern part of Tennessee in the rolling hills, very much like the area where I ended up. Had a wonderful childhood. It was a beautiful area, and I was so fortunate that at the age of 22 I met Laban Carter. Now, Laban was 16 years older than I, and he had 3 children from his first wife who had just recently passed away. Laban and I fell in love, and we got married, and I was so happy not only with the marriage but from the fact that I now had a ready-made family. It was wonderful. And then Laban and I started to have children, and we ended up having 5 children. We had Sarah, we had Barnett, we had Maggie, we had Thomas, and we had Minnie. And life was good. We were farmers. Laban took care of the farm. I was a farmer's wife. We enjoyed it so. And then that terrible War of the Rebellion broke out. And Laban felt the call, and he signed up with the Tennessee regulars. Went with the infantry, and he left us. And I took care of the children. And it was a hard, hard time. Fortunately, his time with the military only lasted about 5 months because they released him because of a disability. And I can tell you right now, there was no happier day in my life than the day that Laban Carter came riding up to our front door on his horse after only 5 months. The children and I, well, I just can't express it. It was wonderful. Laban and I sat down and we talked about it afterwards, and we said, you know, this is war. We don't want to be here. We're going to cross the Ohio. We're going to cross the Mason-Dixon line, and we're going to go north, and we're going to stay in an area called Egypt, which is what this particular area was called at that time. So we came up here, settled first in Jackson County, stayed there for a year. Then we went to Franklin County. We stayed there for a year, and then we finally came to this area. We liked it here. We settled. Laban bought some land, and life was good. And then Laban discovered coal. And I can tell you that with black diamonds, your life is never the same again. So Laban took care of the coal mine. He took care of the business, and I took care of the home. He had built me a marvelous home up on Pea Ridge. Had a big wraparound front porch, had big rooms. Do you know that one of the bedrooms in our home could hold 4 beds? Of course, that was wonderful because we had 8 children. So it just figured that this was the thing to do. We enjoyed it up on Pea Ridge. We had neighbors across the street, the McNeils, both wives of George, Olive, dear Olive, and Alice. They were both friends of mine. We found another good reason to have a bedroom that took 4 beds. If you're familiar with the early Methodist Church, we had circuit riders. The ministers were circuit riders. And when the circuit riders came to town, they stayed with us. And it was wonderful. I had company all the time, and always having a minister in your house. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. Now, the other thing that was wonderful about the church, and by the way, 9 friends of ours got together with us because we missed our church. And we decided that the 11 of us would start that church, and we did. And this is the one over on Pine Street now. Well, Laban loved the church. I love the church. We go to church on Sunday mornings, and Laban would say, now you all come. Only he really meant it. You all come and have Sunday dinner with us. And they did. Every member of the church, every Sunday that the weather was fit, they came for dinner. And we'd set up those big old sawhorses out in the yard, and we'd put big old boards on them, and the girls and I made all the food. Nobody went away hungry, ever. Sometimes when the weather was wonderful, like today, there were so many people we had to eat in shifts. But it was okay. It was okay. Life was good. Life was so good. I never sent anybody away without a little sample of apple butter. Actually, I was kind of famous for my apple butter. It was really good. And so I had this big brass kettle that I made apple butter in. I also made my own homemade soap in it. Also made hominy in it, but apple butter. Sent everybody home with some. Everybody liked it, and they wanted to borrow my kettle, and that was fine. I was more than willing to loan it out, and I did. Loaned it to anybody who wanted it, but I always kind of went with it to sort of keep an eye on things, you know. Over the years, that kettle was used so often that by the time I got where I could no longer make apple butter, the bottom of that kettle was paper thin. But oh, what a good life it had had. Folks, it was a good life. It was a very good life. Things went on. 1889, Laban left me again. Laban left. He went home to be with the Lord. That was hard times. There was really, really hard times. I stayed in Carterville. It was my home. I watched the children grow up. I watched the grandchildren grow up. I watched the town grow up. It was wonderful to be in that town and see everybody. But in 1919, I went home too. But it was a good life. A good life.
45, just 3 miles east of the Sycamore Crossing. My parents were children of settlers who came here from Tennessee to purchase land from the U.S. government and to start a new life. Now, in those days, farming was our trade, and we were hard-working farmers. But on Sundays, the Lord's Day, we would gather together with family and friends in our homes to worship, because we didn't have a church building. So we built one. It was the Hurricane Church, which is way out in the country on the east side of town. Or as the old folks called it, Hurricane. Yes, that church building actually burned down a few years after that, but the cemetery is still there, and many of the settlers of this town are buried there. As you can see, I'm not. Well, it was in my teen years when the Civil War broke out, and my father enlisted with the infantry in the northern, the Union Army, and shortly after that, he fell ill. And so at the age of 17, I took his place, fighting with the 9th Illinois Infantry for 3 years until the end of the war. In that time, I fought in several battles, including Shiloh, Chickamauga, Sherman's March to the Sea, and the burning of Atlanta, to name a few. I returned here to Williamson County following the war and decided to be a gentleman farmer. I bought some land, which is now downtown Carterville. It was a good part of good fertile land. I farmed on it for many years. My land ran from what is now West Grand to South Division to Anderson Street to Olive Street, which was named for my dear sweet wife Olive. Yes, when I first met her, she was Olive Heron. You may know that name, Heron, from the town Heron, although in that time it was known as Heron's Prairie. We got married and raised 3 children, and our house and our farm buildings were located right where the current Carterville Police Department stands. In 1870, a railroad company built some railroad tracks through my property, and that was the line between Carbondale and Shawneetown. And then in 1871, a vein of coal was discovered on my property and my neighbor Laban Carter's property, and coal mining commenced, and that inspired me to take my 40 acres of farmland and start a town. So I hired some surveyors. That would be Sam Bundy. Sam actually is buried right across the road from me over there. And his partner, Mr. Beasley. I hired them to survey my land and draw up a town plat. And that plat was completed and registered in the courthouse in Marion on February 21st, 1872. Now, as Laban told you, we had to have a name for this town, and I personally thought Georgetown was a fantastic name. However, there was already that town up north with the same name. So I thought, Laban, he came here from Tennessee after fighting in the war, and Carter was a good name, so I named it after him, Carterville. I envisioned running down the middle of the town a beautiful wide boulevard called Division Street. And this boulevard needed to be at least 120 feet wide. And so I donated 60 feet of my property, knowing that Laban would also donate 60 feet of his property. Or at least I thought he would. Turns out he didn't donate that 60 feet, and even though I named the town after him, that is why even today, Division Street is 60 feet wide and far too narrow. That was a sore spot with me for the rest of my life. I was the first postmaster in Carterville because my house was the first post office and a hotel. In 1874, my wife, Olive, suffered a tragic injury. She was lighting a kerosene stove to prepare breakfast, and the kerosene can exploded and burned most of her body. She died a few hours later. She is buried in the family cemetery in Heron's Prairie. About a year later, I met this fine lady, and I would like to introduce you to Miss Alice Tranberger.
Yes, hello. My name's Alice Tranberger McNeil, and my father brought us here to settle after the Civil War. Now, you see, my father was very well known in the tobacco industry, and there were likewise a lot of other soldiers in the war that were farmers that came here to settle in Carterville. Now, Carterville was known as a great mining industry town, but it also had a lot of fertile farm ground, and these farmers knew there was a great demand for tobacco out in the eastern United States. So they knew that they could do what they knew best, and that was to plant and grow tobacco and be very profitable at it. And my father built one of the first big tobacco barns here in Carterville, and it was up on East Illinois Street. You all may know that today because it's home to our Lions Club building. Now that barn was a very busy place because as the tobacco was harvested and brought in, it was hung and dried and cured, and it was later taken down and pressed into what they called hogsheads. Now these hogsheads were transported to Metropolis, Illinois, where a lot of them left east on the Ohio and went to towns like Cincinnati and New York City, and a lot of the others went west down the Mississippi to New Orleans. Now, I have a lot of fond memories of that old barn, but one of my fondest was that I learned to take the dried and cured tobacco leaves and cut them and roll them tightly into cigars. Now, the gentlemen in Carterville here liked nothing more than an after-dinner smoke, so it proved to be great, profitable little business for me. Now, my brother Ben also had one of the first businesses here in Carterville, and it was a grocery. And you may know it as the Carterville intersection, where there is home to a lawyer's office now and was the former Carterville Drive-In Bay. I also had the honor and privilege of being Carterville's first school teacher in Carterville's first schoolhouse. Well, I say schoolhouse, it was actually one room in the Browns boarding house. Now, the Browns boarding house was just a short distance off Division on the corner of East Grand and Pennsylvania Street. There were a lot of rigorous rules that a teacher had to follow to be a teacher in that day, and some of them were that you could not drink or smoke, you had to be in regular church attendance, and heaven forbid if anyone ever heard a curse word cross your lips, and you could not be married. Now, if any of these rules were not adhered to, it was surely grounds that you would no longer be a teacher here. Now, I held that position from 1873 to 1875, and I taught students from first grade to 8th grade in that schoolhouse with doing. Now, as the time has gone by, I met Mr. George McNeil. I could no longer teach school because, like I say, you could not be married. And George and I fell in love and decided to start a family of our own. And we lived in downtown Carterville in a hotel. Now, as you can imagine, things became very cramped very quickly, and we decided that we would find some ground to be farm and also to raise our family on. Now, we found that out in the country, and Dobson Street is just a little piece that way. And actually, we are standing in this cemetery in a plot that used to be a part of George and my farm. Well, I'll tell you a little story about that. Dear George did anything to help with Carterville. He had a dream to see Carterville grow and flourish. But unbeknown to me, the people of Carterville came to him and decided that it was time they needed a city cemetery. Well, that was fine, and George obliged, and the deal was done. The only thing was I was never even asked, never told about it. And I need not tell you, just ask anybody in Carterville or my family, and I was sore about that many, many a day. Now, my time came to meet my Lord and Savior in 1918, and although I was sad to leave George and my family and friends, I was so proud for the part that I had had in Carterville to see it turn into the wonderful, flourishing community that it had become.
I outlived Alice as well, and when I went to meet my maker in 1931, just shy of my 86th birthday, I had finished the race, and I had finished it well. And I was ready to meet my maker and to go and see the family members who went on before me, and to watch over my favorite place on earth from high up above. Thank you so much for paying
time. That's where I get to show off my old watch. That's how we do it. So welcome. I am J.V. Walker. My father, Matthew Walker, had the gumption to pick up from Tennessee, put his whole family in an ox-drawn cart, and head for the fertile plains of southern Illinois to become farmers over here. I was born shortly after that in 1858 in a log cabin way out in the countryside, way out in the Samuel Road, way out of the town. My cousin George McNeil and his friend Laban Carter, they started this village, so we were some of the original settlers. We walked to school near Bainbridge. Does anybody know where Bainbridge used to be? If you go look at the railroad tracks where they cross through the west end of Marion by the mall, that used to be a town of Bainbridge, and that's where they had the school. And we walked from Carterville to Bainbridge for school. That's how important it was to my parents to learn to read and write and do arithmetics, which you may know that came in handy to me later. I'm pretty sure it was uphill both ways, as the story goes. Our parents were farmers, but we wanted a different life. In fact, my brother Josh opened a livery stable right there in the town of Carterville to handle animals for folks. My brother Warren and I opened a mercantile business at the northeast corner of Division and Illinois Street, right in the center of town. About where the cable car came through, from here to Heron to Marion and back. We were one of those major stops. The business was booming, and in 1900 we decided to go ahead and divide in order to expand. And my brother took the grocery part of the business to another location, and that thrived. And I kept the mercantile part of the business for clothing sales. And I do believe that if you ask folks in town at the time, they would tell you that we had the finest selection, the widest variety, and the highest quality of clothing, including Hart Schaefer and Mark's suits, Florsheim shoes, and then for the working man, Oshkosh wear, overalls, and boots. It would hold up well for the work that they did. There have been 3 major fires in the Carterville history. The last one, unfortunately, got our business on that corner. But we vowed to rebuild, and we did. And we decided about the same time that the city council decided that everyone should make the buildings out of brick. And so we went for the finest bricks available, and those were made right here in the Carterville Foundry, right behind where the current fire station is. And so we built our building out of bricks on that same northeast corner of the main intersection downtown Carterville. The mayor at the time, E.B. Watson, he and I were both members of the same organization, Oddfellows. And as a gift, knowing that we were rebuilding our building, he presented me with a hand-carved emblem of Oddfellows, which is 3 lengths of a chain, carved from cypress wood, that he did himself and presented to me. And if you go right now into town, the corner of Division and Illinois Street, in the northeast corner, which is my building, and look up on the second floor, there are 3 window areas. 2 of them are windows, one is a set back in the brick. And at the top of that, you'll see a carving of 3 rings, which indicate for our organization of Oddfellows friendship, love, and truth. And that is still there on the building to this day. Our business ultimately expanded to 12 stores, including 4 in Ohio. Ohio, we were big, we were kind of hotshots. 1913 was the end for me. It's a windy day. And I passed away, was buried next to my lovely wife Nellie, and here we rest, having, thank you ma'am, thank you strange person I've never met before, who's helping me.
I could be Nellie.
Nellie. Okay, Nellie. Whoa, Nellie. I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. But laid to rest here in Carterville, to a town that gave us our amazing opportunities, and to which I hope I contributed slightly before the end of my days. Thank you very much. Run away. Going to the next stop?
You can follow me.
Thank you. You're welcome. Also, just after the next stop, there's a cooler under the Easy Up with some bottles of water. Feel free to grab some.
Maybe one seat.
Alice.
Hey, sit down, one seat, kiddos. Just one. Elizabeth, you'll never believe what I saw this afternoon.
John, you're filthy. Clean yourself up a bit.
Right. Sorry.
Now, what were you saying, dear?
Well, this afternoon, while working at the mines, the kind gentleman next to me allowed me to see his newspaper. And just guess what was on the second page.
John, this better be quick. I need to get dinner
Beth,
on the...
listen. The advertisement said, if my mind is correct, new opportunity for coal miners in the southern part of Illinois. and Laban Cart is mine. And what's more, our passage would be free.
America? Oh, John, I do not think that...
But Elizabeth, this is a chance for a better life for you, for me, for the children.
Yes, exactly. Our 4 children. Our 4 young children. How do you expect to move an entire proper family of 6 to America? Our home is in Lancashire, England. I have lived here my whole life. Everything I know and everyone I care about is here. This is my home.
This is my home too, but the conditions in the mine are so poor, and I know I could create a better life for us in America.
A young woman at the age of 18, a young man at the age of 20, moving to America? It just doesn't seem possible. It's only 1869. I know the passage is free, but the conditions aboard the ship will not be ideal for our family. What if little John Jr. falls ill at sea?
Beth, have a little faith. The land in southern Illinois is filled with coal just waiting to be mined. I know our boys and I could create a better life for the Hadfield family legacy.
Oh, John, I love you and I will trust you to the end of our days. I'm going to miss our old home, all the times we've danced together here in England.
Beth, I promise we will dance our way through our new lives in America.
The young couple you have seen portrayed here did indeed move to Illinois.
John Hadfield, also known as Uncle Jack, immigrated to Carterville, Illinois in 1869 with his young wife Elizabeth and their 4 young children.
After settling in Carterville, John and Elizabeth decided to add 4 more children to their brood, making a grand total of 8 children.
John Hadfield, because of the dangerous and dirty conditions in the mine, contracted what we know today as black lung disease. Dr. Ayer tried his best to treat his illness, but through this all, John persevered and did in fact create a better life for his family here in America.
All 8 children settled in Carterville and began families here, and all 6 boys continued their father's legacy in the coal mines.
Who knows, maybe one of you could be a descendant of Elizabeth and John. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Charles William Bishop, United States Congressman. Now, you all know me as Runt. Runt's a nickname. You know, around in these parts, nearly everybody came here from the South, and it was a Southern tradition, and it became a Carterville tradition, a Craneville tradition. Everybody had a nickname. Nobody went by their given name. It was all a nickname. It's not quite so true these days, they tell me. Nevertheless, a nickname, I was the only congressman who put my name in the congressional directory as Runt Bishop. I included my nickname. In fact, the Chicago Tribune interviewed me, and they asked me why did I do that, because it just didn't seem proper to have a congressman called Runt. And I told them this, and you can look it up. They published it on July 26 of 1942. I told them that a nickname is the natural baggage of a human being, and that you can tell more about a man from his nickname than you can from his given name. I'll give you all some examples, and you can think about what you see in your mind and what it means. Old Hickory, Honest Abe, Caligula. You remember Caligula. Actually, his name was Gaius, and that was his given name, and Caligula was a nickname. How did he get it? Well, his father was emperor, and when they were in France, he was a little boy, kind of like these children here, and his father's army called him Caligula. Caligula means little booties. So he had Emperor Little Booties. So I went by the name of Runt because it told more who I was. I was born on a farm in 1890. And that's why I'm carrying this hoe, just to sort of demonstrate it. And as a farmer, I was familiar also with the term Runt. Although I was born in West Vienna, I went to school in Anna. I got the name actually because I was a 90-pound quarterback on the football team in Anna. But I never really felt like it was disparaging in any way, because having been born on a farm, now some of you may not know what this means, but we all did back then, run of the litter. Didn't bother me, because if you were the run of the litter, you had to be faster, quicker, and smarter, or you wouldn't survive. And so I took it actually as a compliment. So I was known as Runt. In 1907, I left Union County and I came up here to Carterville. And I came because my father had opened a picture show downtown called the Nickelodeon. It was a silent picture show. There was no talking. He played a piano as the film ran, and you could see the picture as it went. Well, I did that after 2 years. I could tell I wasn't going to go anywhere there, and after all, my name was Runt, and I had to scramble. So what I did is I became a coal miner, and I became a lineman. During that period of time, I also played professional baseball and professional football. But I was after making money. And I wanted to make enough money because I learned to be a tailor. And a tailor, for you kids, is where you actually make the clothes. You don't go to the store and buy them. You go to a place and they measure you, and they don't have a pattern, and they actually make the clothes to fit you. Well, I learned how to be a tailor. And the cameraman here is going to have to continue to move because I can't stand still and talk at the same time. I'm a politician. I'm supposed to be able to talk. Okay, so, and I do, and I love talking, and I love talking to people. But anyway, where was I? I was in the movie business, and then I decided I'd be a lineman, a coal miner, and as I told you, I saved my money. And in 1911, 2 years later, I opened up a tailor shop. Now, the tailor shop, some of you probably will remember, back in 1911, the tailor shop was down at Walker's Livery Stable. Y'all know where that's at? You probably know it as Create a Smile. That place right there. That's where I had my tailor shop. And business was good. And during that period of time, I met a woman, a very lovely lady by the name of Elizabeth. And we got married. And she never was called Elizabeth, she was called Lizzie. And so we were known all over town as Runt and Lizzie. And you couldn't say one hardly without saying the other because people couldn't put everything together. If they said Lizzie, they wouldn't know Runt, and vice versa. Might not even know Lizzie because she was associated with Runt and vice versa. Nevertheless, business was really good. And I sort of started a political career at that time because I became city clerk. And I was city clerk of Carterville from 1913 to 1915. And business was really good. In 1923, I was able to save enough money to add a dry cleaning shop to my tailor business. And so we continued to live in Carterville, and you know, we really enjoyed our lives here. We were so much part of the community. We had so many friends here. And we enjoyed our time here. In 1923, times really got good for the bishops because I was appointed postmaster of the post office here in Carterville. And I served there till 1933. Well, in 1940, I was elected to the United States Congress. And before I tell you about that and my service, a little bit about my service, I want to tell you here because I'm just like you are. I have memories. Some of them stand out more than others. And besides my memory of my beloved Lizzie and my son Jack, who was born to us as our only child, and I played golf when I was in Congress fairly regularly with President Eisenhower. So those things stick out in my mind. But the things that really stick out in my mind are two things. A baseball game that never was played, and then a ball game that was played regularly and annually. I was involved in both. In the baseball game that was never played, I had a friend, Albert Blyer, and he loved baseball too. Some of you may know who he is, the father of Bill Blyer, and Jim Blyer, Frank Blyer, and Tom Blyer. And he was a baseball fan too. And we got the idea because we had played locally around here, and I'd played some professional baseball. Other people had. Gordon Riggin had played professional baseball. He became an undertaker here in town. And we could see that we had some very good baseball players. in the area. And because we were so remote, we always were not scouted like other people were scouted. We didn't hardly have the opportunity to let our ball players really shine, but we thought we were as good as the St. Louis Cardinals. So we challenged the St. Louis Cardinals to a baseball game. We told them, said, you come here to Carterville and we'll play you a baseball game. Now the St. Louis Cardinals were really good in 1926. Some of you may have heard the name Rogers Hornsby. Rogers Hornsby is the greatest hitting second baseman who ever lived, bar none. He put together several years of hitting over 400 and hit quite a few home runs. He was thought of in the same breath as Babe Ruth, who I know you've heard of. Well, we thought we'd play him and we'd beat him. They wanted $1,000, which was a lot of money in those days, a lot of money. And we came up with it and we said, we can pay you. You come to Carterville, and what we're going to do is we're going to pick the place, and we did. Now the place we were going to play them was Venable's pasture. Now Venable's had a dairy farm, and it was out south of town. And for those of you who don't know, if you went out to where Moto Mart is now, to that intersection, and you go straight across like you're going to Crab Orchard Lake, down on the right, just as you cross, is the place where the old Venable farm was. And since it was a dairy farm and they had some land, they had a nice pasture. That's where we were going to play the game. But we got worried. What happens if they don't show up? What happens if it rains? What happens if we got to get our $1,000 back? So we insured it with the Lloyds of London, who agreed, if the game's not played for any reason, we're going to give you your $1,000 back. You pay us a premium. I won't tell you how much it is because, you know, insurance companies are going to ask for a large premium. Nevertheless, we paid it. The St. Louis Cardinals came. Rogers Hornsby was not happy with the arrangement at all because they had a game the very next day, and he couldn't see coming way down here in the country playing a team of rum-dums like us, or he thought, and so he wasn't wanting to come at all. We never got to play. It rained. But we got our $1,000 back, but we still wonder what would have happened. The St. Louis Cardinals won the World Series that year. The second game that sticks out in my mind is a game that I organized when I was in Congress, and it was played annually and regularly. It's not played that way now anymore. Back then, we couldn't fly back and forth to our districts. I mean, the only way to go was by train. And so once you got there, you were stuck. You couldn't just come home even once a month, even maybe once every 2 months. So we took our families and we would move there. And in consequence of that, we became by and large friends. We might have political differences. We might be on one side of the aisle or the other, but our families would meet in our homes and our wives got friendly with one another, and we all enjoyed our own company. I think that's a better way of living than the way they do now. Anyway, I organized the game, and it would be the Senate against the House. We picked our all-stars. They picked their all-stars. We won the first game. I won't tell you how it turned out. That game was played about 20 years. They made newsreels out of it. Some of you may remember seeing a newsreel of that game played at the old Hayton Theater downtown, who's down there where Charlie's is now. Well, I was elected to Congress in 1940. I took my seat and was sworn in on January 2 of 1941. 11 months later, the Empire of Japan, on December the 7th, secretly and without warning attacked the United States. President Roosevelt asked for a joint session of Congress. He spoke to us, and then several days later we had a vote, and I voted to commit this country to World War II against Japan and against Germany. Another thing that's interesting, I think, perhaps to the local people, is Crab Orchard National Wildlife Refuge. That was my bill. And I went around and I talked to the members of Congress, telling them that we need to take the United States Ordinance, the Illinois Ordinance Plan, and all that land and convert it into a national wildlife refuge to assist the Mississippi Flyway. And it was accepted. And when you go out to the Crab Orchard National Wildlife Refuge, that is my bill of something that I'm very proud of. In 1954, I was defeated, and Lizzie and I had other opportunities and many opportunities, but you know, I was a product of Carterville. It was here that I really came to be someone who could represent this area in the United States Congress. So there was really no question what we wanted to do. We wanted to return to Carterville, and we did. While I was here, I did some labor conciliation for the National Labor Board, and by and large, eventually retired. I was granted 84 years and 81 days of life here on Earth. And I died on September 21 of 1971, and I was buried here. Later, my beloved Lizzie joined me. And so here we are. And as long as the earth endures, we'll be a part of the soil of Carterville. Thank you for coming.